I want to know why they didn't do the right thing, why they left them so abandoned that people were holding on to the wheels of the plane, of the American plane that was flying away. All right, let's talk about Afghanistan. What a show. What a mess. Really, we need to be calling in some people who were in charge of this debacle. And I'm not just talking about the evacuation. I'm talking about the entire 2-decade-long war that we spent in Afghanistan, spending trillions of dollars, losing American lives. Countless civilians were killed. And for what exactly? The Taliban were able to take over Afghanistan in a matter of days. And worse yet, the people were waving them in. The people were cheering them in. If that is not an epic American failure beyond any failure that we have ever experienced, I think, in any war that the U.S. is engaged in, I don't know what is a failure. This is worse than Vietnam, quite frankly, when it comes to how badly this was bungled, how badly we misread the room. All right, where do we start? First of all, just listen to Joe Biden and the excuses that he gave. And I'm not going to pin this on Joe Biden. I don't think that's fair. This is 4 administrations worth. I think there needs to be an Afghanistan commission that is held. I know that the Congress loves to have commissions, right? They love to have 9/11 commissions and January 6th commissions. Well, they need, but yeah, I know this is not going to happen because Democrats are in control and Joe Biden is a Democrat. But they need to have an Afghanistan commission. And we need to find out who knew that the people of Afghanistan would support the Taliban over the United States military and the puppet, crony, corrupt government that we propped up for decades over there. Who knew that this is exactly what would happen the moment we withdrew? I'm guessing they all knew. That is what I'm guessing. And that is why I'm guessing this war went on for 20 years, because none of them had the guts to pull out of that war. None of them wanted this fiasco that Joe Biden is having to live with. And Joe Biden being the big sacrificial lamb in a lot of different ways when it comes to this. I'm not saying he's the innocent guy. I'm not going to say, oh, Joe Biden, he's just the fall guy and it's not his fault. No, it's his fault too. But I'm going to give him some props. I know this is going to upset some people, but I'm going to give him some props for having the guts to do what the other 3 guys weren't willing to do. They talked about it. They fiddled around with it a little bit. Trump even played footsie with the Taliban, but none of them were actually willing to do the really dirty job of leaving Afghanistan and watching the civilians cheer in the Taliban. So we really misread the room, right? They sold to us Americans a lie. They told us that we were there to bring law and order to Afghanistan, that we were there to usher in some sort of liberalization or human rights, and we were there to make some advancements. And, when we arrived, the Taliban controlled, a tiny fraction of Afghanistan. And now today, 20 years later, when we're leaving, Taliban control it all. So did we make progress? Did we do what we set out to do? Did we even come close? This was a giant lie that we were sold. We were told that this is what we were doing. People bought into this. People bought into the lie that we were over there preserving human rights, keeping law and order. And then it turns out that the government that we propped up, this puppet government, was completely corrupt. The Afghan people didn't want anything to do with that government anymore. Many of them switched and started supporting the Taliban. They started to sympathize with the Taliban, and others just were indifferent to the Taliban. They were like, Taliban or this government, what's the difference? It's all bad. So it really, really need to have an Afghanistan commission on this one. And worse yet, obviously, we're seeing this evacuation totally bungled. I'm going to give it to Joe Biden. He did say that the reason why he didn't evacuate, who knows if this is a lie. If it is, it's a little bit believable. I can kind of understand it, but kind of not, considering the president of Afghanistan, the one that we were propping up, said to his people, everything's going to be fine. You're all going to be safe. And then he takes his suitcases, I'm sure, full of cash and runs off on a plane and gets the hell out of there. So Joe Biden is claiming that he was asked by the Afghan government not to evacuate, not to have this sort of big fanfare of getting everybody out of there, because they didn't want him to trigger any sort of alarm, or they didn't want him to trigger any sort of panic and and then trigger a lack of morale. Now, I believe that to be true. I just don't know if I believe that it was the Afghan government that asked for that. My guess is it was actually the administration itself. It was the Defense Department. It was the State Department. And they said, it's the Taliban are going to take over pretty quickly, but they're probably going to take over even quicker if they realize we're evacuating all these people. We're basically admitting defeat if we evacuate everyone. Because you think about the optics of that, right? So if the U.S. says we're withdrawing, we're leaving our troops, we're withdrawing all of our troops and we're heading out of here. The narrative was, but Afghanistan won't fall to the Taliban. We built up this security force. We've got this government. We spent all this money and we took all this time training them and we took decades to do it. And so, of course, they're going to hold Afghanistan for at least a month. That was the narrative, right? And so when you look at it from that perspective, and you're making a decision, you're sitting in the Oval Office or in their war room or wherever they make all of these atrocious decisions, and you're having to decide, okay, are we going to start evacuating everybody? And if we do that, I can see Kamala, well, Joe, if we do that, the optics, I don't know if she really said this, but I'm just imagining this fantasy of a horrible conversation that was going on between Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Kamala Harris and Floyd Austin, who are sitting around and being like, well, we don't want to admit the Taliban won. So the way to, we are admitting it if we evacuate everybody. So if we do the right thing, and we start evacuating the people whose lives are going to be at risk because they were working for us and they were fighting for us, against them, against their own people, by the way. Taliban are Afghans. So they were fighting against their own people. And so rather than do the right thing and evacuate our translators, evacuate the people that were working with us, evacuate the generals that were fighting, the Afghan generals for their puppet military, right? Rather than do the right thing, these jerks, I would say a much stronger word, but this show is supposed to be for families or something. These jerks decided that they didn't want the appearance of a loss. That's what he admitted today. They didn't want to appear to have lost. And so they left everybody behind. Wow. On all fronts, wow, about this entire thing. So we spent 2 decades, American lives, civilian lives, $2 trillion. And it was not supported by the Afghan people. It didn't make any progress. In fact, it reeled them further backwards now that the Taliban have taken over, right? The reports are coming out, and great conversation this morning on the Hill. I've been guest co-hosting on Hill's Rising, and definitely watch the first segment of the show. We're talking to an expert on Afghanistan who was over there a decade ago, and he really lays out how bad that Afghan government was. And you really should watch that segment because it really paints the picture of why exactly when the Taliban rolled in all through Afghanistan, they were met with no resistance. And not only no resistance, but they were met with cheers in a lot of situations. So you have to watch that segment, and then you'll really understand how corrupt the government was that we were propping up. that we were spending money in. There were millions of dollars that were sent to Afghanistan, our tax dollars that were meant to build schools and give them clean water and all of these wonderful things. And none of it ever made it to the Afghan people. None of it. It lined the pockets of this puppet crony government that we were propping up for 2 decades under the guise of a lie. And then in the end, because we didn't want to admit that we had that, well, they don't. I mean, I'm not going to say we. I didn't do this. They did this. And they should, heads should roll. No pun intended, but they should. This is despicable. The fact that they lied to us for 2 decades, telling us that this is what we were doing with our tax dollars. Many of us were against it. A lot of people were for it. But nonetheless, it happened. We all paid for it. And it all happened under our flag. And you know, they lied to us about this. They lied to us. We propped it up. We were propping up a corrupt government that was siphoning the resources away from the Afghan people, resources that we were paying for that never made it to the people. And my guess is our government knew, absolutely they knew, there's no way you could spend 2 decades over there and not know that the Afghan people have turned on you because they realize the government you've installed to rule them is corrupt and not giving them their resources. And then I just am so sickened by his admission today that the reason why he didn't evacuate everybody in advance was because it would admit defeat. And we didn't want those optics. As if the optics aren't bad enough. So now what? Well, like I said, there should be some questions asked. And I don't mean just of the Biden administration. Drag all their asses in from the last 4 administrations. Get George W. in that door. You want to talk about, listen, if you're willing to impeach Trump after he's out of office, impeach all of them. Let's do it one by one. Get them all in there and impeach every one of them. And then impeach, do whatever it is you need to do to all of the Secretary of States. That includes Hillary Clinton, right? All of them. Get them in there and say, what the hell did you know? How long did you know it? How long were you hiding it from the American people? Why were you hiding it from the American people? What was the motivation there? So here's the questions I want to know. Did they stick around Afghanistan because they were afraid of the optics of what Joe Biden has just done? They knew that, oh no, you don't want that one on you. You don't want those optics. You don't want that comparison to the fall of Saigon, right? You don't want that on you because that's a death sentence for you. Democrats, by the way, they don't care if Joe Biden takes the fall because they were planning on it anyway. But did they not do what they needed to do? Did they not do the right thing because they were afraid of the optics and they were just insulating themselves politically? Did they not do the right thing because, another question, because they were bought off by the military-industrial complex? They were making a lot of money over there and they didn't want the war to stop? Hey, if you can keep war going, $2 trillion, keep it going. Right? Is that why? Was it because of that? Or was it because we have other interests in the Middle East? That we ruined the lives of these Afghan people. We lined the pockets of their crony government. We then abandoned them because we were, trying to surround Iran? Is that why? I would like to know why they lied for 2 decades. And I would like to know why they didn't do the right thing and evacuate the contractors and the translators and anybody else who wanted to get out who helped the U.S. government during these 2 decades. I want to know why they didn't do the right thing, why they left them so abandoned that people were holding on to the wheels of the plane, of the American plane that was flying away. And they fell to their deaths. And I want to know why. I want to know why. So, we should all be outraged by this. We should all be livid and angry and sad and mortified by the images we're seeing. We should all be feeling this way. This is how the world will view America. People died at that airport over the last several hours. People have died. And it wasn't the Taliban who killed them. The most egregious images that are coming out of Afghanistan right now are because of Americans, not because of the Taliban. I mean, think about that. We're watching bodies fall from the sky off of airplanes as people held onto the wheels for their lives, thinking they had no other option because they were fighters for the Americans. And they knew that once the Taliban found out that they themselves would not be spared. And so they held on for their lives as the Americans flew away. And they fell to their deaths. And those images are on us, not the Taliban. That's on us. And the shots that were fired in the air that caused for numerous people to be trampled to death as they were waiting, hoping to get on those planes. And the Americans trying to scatter them, saving instead the wealthy elites. And those people scattered and ran and trampled over one another. And that wasn't the Taliban that did that. So the images that are coming out of Afghanistan right now, the most atrocious images, are coming because we royally 2 decades and a mere number of just hours. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to turn a blind eye to this and just say, oh, well, we needed to get out? There's no doubt about that. That was the right decision. We did not need to be there. The Afghan people have decided that they're going to live under the Taliban. I know that's very difficult for a lot of Western people to wrap their minds around, but the reality is they prefer them over us. So that is what's happened. We have to live with that. We have to understand that. And we have to accept it, and we need to recognize it. We need to recognize their government. We need to not limit them. We definitely don't need to be putting any sanctions or embargoes on them as they try to rebuild from the decades upon decades, and not just us, but the Soviets and us then funding the Mujahideen. You know, all of this, everything has been this imperialistic empire after empire that has marched in to try to take their land. And those people love their country, don't they? Because they have fought off every empire at every turn to try to gain their country back. And they finally have it back. So we need to, first of all, recognize them as a government, whether we like it or not. We need to help them rebuild, whether we like it or not. We are going to oppose of their religion. We are going to oppose of their Islamic laws that they're going to be enforcing. But you know what? It's law and order for them, and not living under war, and finally being able to rebuild and having some sort of security is better than what we were offering them. That is first. And then second, heads need to roll. We need to bring people in one by one, march them in, ask questions. Nobody should be okay with this. And it was the failure of 4 administrations. And we should demand answers. None of them should be working in government ever again. Ever again. So, we shall see. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? All right, guys. Thank you for watching. This is a hard day. Thank you for, I'm sure you're feeling a lot like I am. If you're seeing what I'm seeing, and, this is really, really atrocious. So that's all I have to say about that for now. So thanks, guys. If you'd like to see more of my content, especially the uncensored kind, sign up for my Locals community. Locals is where we can freely discuss topics that are often censored or limited by big tech. Not only will you get bonus segments not seen on YouTube, but you'll also gain access to my casual behind-the-scenes live streams, informative postings stacked with valuable information, and even just random fun pics and videos from my personal life. It's a way to support my show while getting more content. It's $5 a month for premium access and free for others. So go to my locals page at kimiverson.locals.com.